We have so many stories in our lives, but our stories are not always heard. On the Hear My True Story podcast, we tell our own true stories.
Before the white car parked, our head teacher had scattered. Looking at him, I could only see his tie that was flying backwards, waving at us, and he disappeared in thin air.
I want to share my life story. I want to share my voice with the people because I know that just a small joke I can tell through this podcast, it will make someone smile.
When you ask me what I fear most in life, I would definitely respond to you and say it's fear itself.
We are fighting for togetherness. We are fighting for equal rights. We are fighting to end injustice.
You don't have to be a storyteller or writer because, guess what? Life writes the best stories.
Hear my true story.
My interesting experience of learning German just with the simple things like articles. My brother, sister, anyone listening to this wonderful podcast, it is not easy, but it is a terror, a fight, a struggle to have the right articles to use on which noun, which object, which stuff is die, der, das. So when you find a German person, tell them, my friend, die, der, das. Which one is which? Which one should I use?
This is your favorite time of the week with your number one podcast.
Hear my true story.
Our dear listeners, welcome back again on this wonderful podcast. It is me, your host, Otako. Yeah, I'm always happy to have you on Hear My True Story podcast. Wow, for those who are listening for the first time, this is Hear My True Story podcast, where we tell our own true stories based on real life experiences. You know why? Because life writes the best story. Yeah, for those who are just new on the podcast, you can subscribe, follow us on all podcasting streaming platforms. I hope that you enjoy my wonderful story. Thank you for always being on this wonderful podcast, Hear My True Story podcast.
With you every week. Hear my true story.
So, let me tell you about my interesting journey of learning the German language. You know, when I first decided to dive into this linguistic adventure of learning the German language, little did I know that the innocent-looking die and der, das articles would turn out to be a worst nightmare for me. Who came up with all these so-called articles, Were they just sitting around one day and like, oh man, yeah, let's make something extra complicated for people who are learning the German language, seriously. It's like they wanted to test our mental resilience, our mental persistence, our mental patience. You know, in English, we have it easy. We just say they or a, maybe an. For most of the things, it is simple. It is straightforward. If I want to talk about a table, I say the table or a table. Boom, done. Seriously, it's finished. No gender issue things required. You don't have to ask the table its gender. But in German language, my friend, they have got a whole circus going on. You have got das for neutral stuff, die for feminine things, der for masculine objects. Yeah, it's like trying to play a linguistic puzzle. You need to find where it fits. Picture this. I was chatting with a German-speaking friend, and I casually mentioned a study in my sentence. Now, in English, I would have just said this study and moved on with my life. But no, not in German. I mistakenly used the wrong article, and the person pounced on me like a grammar ninja, like a grammar corrector. They just had to correct my article choice because apparently they take these things quite very serious. If you're speaking German, the articles. It's like German speakers have developed another sense of detecting who is misplacing articles of words, objects, articles of stuffs. You utter out a sentence and they immediately raise their eyebrows like, man, you used a wrong article for that. Study, it is das Studium, not their studium. I swear, it's like, man, they have article detectors all the time. I speak a sentence in German and someone's like, it is not their datum. It is das datum. Then I'm in a position where I have to always think about the article before I say a sentence. Because imagine you are speaking and then you mention a wrong article. For example, their experiment. And then, Otako, you just said their experiment, but it is das Experiment. That is German for you. And don't even get me started on the all masculine, feminine, neutral thing. I mean, how do you even determine the gender of an object? Do you ask the table, table, are you feeling masculine or feminine today? Or is it, it is so much pain to decide whether it is feminine or it is masculine. It's always so difficult to really know which article to use for such things. But, my friend, you have to accept that learning German is like, ride that is full of ups and downs. It has unexpected twists. And it is sometimes difficult. It can terrorize you. Sometimes, you can be scared, but you need to move on. Mostly, men, if you mess up with articles, you start questioning your language. So, if you are thinking of learning German, just remember to keep your articles in check. Or you might find yourself in never-ending grammatical loopholes, But don't worry, it is all part of the fun, And in the end, you have something to tell. You have a great story to share, just like me. And who knows, Who knows that maybe someday we'll be there and, we get to have more articles coming. Because, there are many things that are changing about gender. So we may have more articles coming, and then you need to learn them and use them. Yeah. That's how interesting my story has been to share with you. My interesting experience of learning German just with the simple things like articles. My brother, sister, anyone listening to this wonderful podcast, it is not easy, but it is a terror, a fight, a struggle to have the right articles to use on which noun, which object, which stuff is die, der, das. So when you find a German person, tell them, my friend, die, der, das. Which one is which? Which one should I use?
Enjoying this episode? Leave a review now.
Hear my true story.
Wow. So that was my experience learning German and dealing with those tricky articles. The die, der, das. Here are some of the things that I can share with you. Firstly, learning a language can be both challenging and entertaining. When you learn a new language, you discover all sorts of interesting and complex things that can become funny stories sometimes. Like these articles that caused me so much confusion ended up giving me a wonderful story about learning the German articles in the language, I also realized that even though it can be challenging to learn a new language, there's something charming about embracing the uniqueness of that new language. I remember the moment when someone corrected my article usage in German. It was a little embarrassing, that's the truth, but it showed me that, okay, it is important to pay attention when using a different language. And to that, I try to think about the article before I say it. And also not forgetting the joy of exploring a different culture. When you learn German, it is not just about learning the language, which is German. It's about understanding a whole new life of culture, of the people speaking that language and the people living in that language. For instance, if you're learning German, the language, and you're living in Germany, then you need to understand the culture of the people living in Germany. And also, you learn the language at the same time. That's how so beautiful it is. It is not just about speaking it, but it's also about embracing the culture of that language. And of course, also, along the way, you laugh about the mistakes you make when you're learning a new language. Like me, I just laugh about when I use the wrong article, where I need to say die Prüfung, and then I say, oh, der Prüfung, and then I remember, oh no, Otako, it has to be die Prüfung. So that's the beautiful thing about it. Yeah, also I realized that, man, I'm lucky with my mother tongue, which is Lusoga. I don't need to have to use these articles. When I speak my mother tongue, Lusoga, I just speak without articles. And also English, it is not my mother tongue, but it's the official language. For people who come from Uganda, in East Africa, we speak English. But then I also realized, wow, it's better. I don't have to use these so-called articles. I have to be so straightforward. Either use a, they, or an. And then it's finished. So that's the beautiful thing of appreciating the simplicity of such a language like English. So, my dear listeners, as I continue on my language learning journey, trying to tackle with new things in this language like the adjective endings in German, that's also another story for another day. I'll do it with a smile. I'll try to learn the language with a smile, although it is very tough. But also I'll take the challenges as grateful moments that I can share with you guys here on my wonderful podcast. And for that reason, I would like to thank you for joining me on this wonderful episode about my experience of learning the German language. And if anytime in your life you decide to learn a new language, remember to enjoy the fun when learning the language. Let it be a funny journey for you as you learn that language. And for those who are listening to this wonderful episode of Hear My True Story podcast, and maybe you are in your journey of learning the new language like German, you are welcome. German is a tough language, but make sure that you don't forget these so-called articles because they can make you go crazy. Next time, I'll tell you my wonderful moment that will never make me forget my journey of learning the German language. It has been me, Otako, your host on this wonderful podcast. Hear My True Story. I would like to say bye for now. Thank you for always listening.
We not only have voices for a podcast, but also faces for YouTube. Don't miss your next episode. Hear my true story.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Music by Edwin Matovo, hosted and produced by Otako. Subscribe to our podcast for more stories and visit us on our website, hearmytruestory.com, for more stories. All the links are listed in the show notes of this podcast.